Linda from Lányos Handmade, and today we are going to do another Marathon Sewciety video session. Everybody's going to be sewing up 30-minute gifts that you can pop off quickly, just in time for the holidays. Don't forget to check the link below to watch everybody's videos so you can get lots of wonderful ideas. Now, what I have for you today is the Lányos Handmade Coffee Purse. This is a quick little wallet that you can sew up for yourself. It's got a couple of spots in here for cards and change and whatever you like to carry. Now, I have made one out of fabric on my domestic machine and one out of vinyl. These are actually cut and sews that THCG Supply has. So I've made one out of vinyl too, and it worked out pretty well. Now, if you haven't seen cut and sews before, basically she sticks the, that's kind of cute cows. She sticks the pattern piece on the vinyl with the design. She's got tons of choices for you. And you just cut out along the lines and you're ready to sew. So the only other thing I needed besides the cut and sew vinyl was to get some hardware. There's a zipper and a zipper pull and the lining fabric inside. And then I used some stabilizer and some interfacing. Now I shall leave the link for the fabric one that I sewed up so you can see how I did with it, what I did different. And of course, today we're going to do the cut and sew version. Now, this is a free pattern if you are a member of the Lányos Handmade Pattern Party Facebook group. So I'll leave the link for the group down below too. Now, there's a person who is in our Facebook group and they made 23 of these for holiday gifts for their friends and family. So I've got 2 down. I guess I just have another 21 to go.
Okay, this is going to be probably the fastest video you've ever seen because the boss says I have to be under 30 minutes. So what I've got here is my label. I've got some stronger stabilizer. I've got 2 lining layers and 2 outside layers cut out, right? These are from THCG Supply, and they are cut and sews like I showed you in the beginning. So those pieces are good. This is good. This is my divider piece. There'll be an awful lot of ironing and marking to make this work. And I've got a special roll of thread here because there will be a point when your stitching does show to the other side along the bottom and just a bit along here. So that's why I like to get something that matches in my bobbin. I'm not going to use it all the time. I'm only going to use it for the seams that show. So we'll talk more about that later. And right now I'm going to put on my zipper pull. There you go. See? Tricky. Safety pins. Now with this pattern, seam allowances and where you place your zipper and where you place the zipper tape is really important. I've got my centers marked and I'm going to line this up with the center. I'm not going to put it on the edge because I want it in a bit just so that I can have the maximum, because I can still sew on the seam allowance this way and just catch the edge of the zipper. And that way, when I stick this on just the edge and sew on the edge, I'll still have the same amount of seam allowance I'm supposed to have. But when we fold this back after we're finished, we'll have the widest amount of zipper tape showing here. And it'll make the widest little purse that we can get our hands on. Now, when it comes to the corners, I've got to put some snips in here. And I'm still going to run it through the machine with my zipper foot and make sure that it's the seam allowance that is called for in the pattern. For me, it makes no difference at all whether I have my pull down here or down here, because both sides are exactly the same. Now let's see how this turned out. As you can see, my stitching line is on the seam allowance requested in the pattern, so that's good. And it's also got all the zipper tape covered here so the zipper won't fall off, and yet I still have some extra space so that my tape is at its maximum. I did snip a lot through here too, because it always makes it nicer to turn when you have lots of snips in it. So that's going to be a nice outside layer for this. So now let's do the inside layer. And when we do the inside layer, you want to make sure that this is lined up really nicely. If I'm making one with fabric, then it's easy to put pins in, but I don't. This is vinyl, of course. So I want to make sure that this is all lined up nice. That's what your coffee purse is going to look like. So let's get our little double-sided tape off here, and we'll line it up the same way. We've got our centers. We do it just a bit off. We go around. And if it makes it difficult for you to do this, you can open your zipper up now that your bottoms are together. And again, same thing, we just snip along here just a little bit. Okay, we're all set up to sew. This will go in well because it's all lined up on the bottom. So I might just undo it again and sew around so I have less mess in my way here when I'm trying to get around. Okay, so we go up around the same way. Make sure you keep your seam allowance at what it's supposed to be, and we'll just catch the zipper like we did here. Okay, I've sewed both sides on. It's got the zipper on here. I did do my clips in here, lots of them, and I did put fray check on the clips in the zipper because I want it to stay together. So even though I cut in here and broke the integrity of the zipper, I did put fray check on it afterwards. Next we put these on, and this is the lining. Now with the lining, it's important to have your marks on here. It's important to know where your centers are. And all we're going to do is place it on top of here and sew it again. We've got our guidelines on our seam allowance right here. That's on there too. We've got a stop sewing line down here. Do not sew past this line on the pattern, because later this is going to be your hem for your inside of your coffee purse. So don't sew past those lines. So I'm just going to sew from here and around there on both sides. Sandwich my zipper in between, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like again. Okay, I've sewed both sides. And when you're sewing, you might want to stick your finger inside. Like I've got my needle down into my materials here, and I put my finger inside and make sure that I've flattened out my zipper. And I usually just go one stitch at a time around the corner, and then I end up with a nicer zipper curve. There's nothing wrong when you're sewing to stop and check if you're totally off track, right? So this side's done, this side's done. I turned this side just to check and see if I liked it. And I'll do the same on the other side just to make sure I like it, and I do like it. So I'll turn this side. Now if this is too bulky in the corners, I could go in and trim it down, but I might just leave it and see what it feels like. I'm not going to top stitch it because I have a domestic Janome machine and I don't want to make it upset. Yes, now what we're going to do is put it wrong sides, well, these are right sides together, and we're going to clip it together, centered, right there. I have to get a clip. Make sure these stay up and out of the way, because we're going to sew our two outer layers together. There, so now I've got it clipped with these outer layers right side together, and I'm going to sew across my seam line here, my stitching line, and from one corner to the other corner. And that'll finish off the outside of this, and then we can start working on the inside. Okay, this is sewn together nicely now. When it comes time to finish this off, when you press these flat, when you butterfly them, these want to come in anyway. So they're going to come in and hide under here. So this one and this one are going to meet, and that's going to, minus these threads, that's going to keep the zipper inside. So there you go. So what we want now is to slide this in. And when I put this in, I want to have it underneath nice and flat. There's seam allowances in here. Let's tuck it under the seam allowance everywhere so that it's nice and flat. And you can feel it when it comes up, right? You want to make sure the seam allowance is all underneath. So I'm going to tuck these two things inside. This will help support it a little bit more. And then we move on to our dividers. So now that this piece is all done, amazingly enough, that is how it's supposed to look. This will all get tucked inside afterwards. But I've got my little reinforcement in here. And this is done for now. So now I've got my divider, and my divider has been pressed and pressed. And I was supposed to put more guidelines on here, but I didn't. But I made sure I got the seam allowance here. And this is also a stop sewing line, so it'll show up later. So let's put a label on, and I think right here is a pretty good spot for it. So I'll sew the label on, and then we'll move on to the next part. Okay, label is on. It's going to end up looking like this with it on the inside, but it's like a little origami divider. For now, let's put our seam on the side here. So I'm just going to sew that according to the seam allowance. And then after, I'll press it and I'll turn it out again. So it's sewn and pressed. Now let's turn. And we want to turn it so that it folds right on that long edge there. We want it to turn like that. So it's a tube, but it's a lined tube. So I'm going to go press this one more time. And then after, I'm going to take this seam and match it up with this center point that we have here and press it again. I want to make sure that everything is lined up nicely. Okay, I've matched up my center here with my seam here, and I've pressed it really well so the edges are really sharp, and I'm going to edge stitch along here and along here. Before you run away and sew, remember there, I just drew it in here now, but because I know I'm going to forget, is there's a stop sewing line here. So when you're sewing this edge stitching in on these two sides, don't go past this line. Maybe you can see it better on this side. Don't go past this line because we're going to need this unsewn down here. So I'm just going to edge stitch from here to there and there to there. Edge stitching done. I stayed out of my no-sew zone. So let's turn it around. Now you've got our little label on the inside. And let's do some more origami. This time we're going to push this in just 1 inch. Make sure it's nice and level. And we want clips on both these pieces. Let's do it on this side. Same thing. Remember, there's no sew zone. And I'm going to go press this so that I can edge stitch it and stay out of this no sew zone. So this is going to be your top folded edge, and this is your raw edge, and this is where you don't sew in this zone here. Now I've edge stitched, but I didn't edge stitch down there. That's a really hard word to say. And I did the same with all 4. Left this open. Okay, now when we flatten this out, you'll notice the labels on the inside. When we flatten this out, we want to snip this fold. And that's why we didn't edge stitch it, because it's easier to snip it when it's not sewn. Edge stitching only goes up to there. And this fold is the one we're going to cut into. And the same on the other side. This fold is the one we cut into. I want to make sure I cut right on the fold. And the reason for that is because now this can fold this way and this can fold this way. And that's what we want, because then it will eventually stand up. Now, I keep having to put this line in over and over again because I iron it off. We're going to hold this flat, totally. Maybe I'll put a clip in too. And we're going to sew through all the layers. We're going to seal up this bottom here, right there. So, sew down here and then press the 2 pieces up. And there we have it. It's all sewn, flattened out. I pressed it this way really nicely, and it stands up by itself. Now we can put it in. Okay, I've got this ready and it's standing up. And this wouldn't have worked unless we snipped to this little fold here and this little fold here. So since we cut those, we can spread it wide. Now the pattern piece shows where to cut, but if you forget to cut it before you start making it, that's the little fold that you cut open. So this is done. So now we have to put this in this. Now this is, it makes me nervous. So I am going to first, before we continue, you see how I've pulled the zipper pull up so that it's in the open part of our coffee purse. I'm going to just right here hand sew a couple of stitches, and that will be my zipper stop. And the same on this side, just where this fold is, right? That fold about there, I'm going to hand sew a zipper stop and probably use black thread so it looks like the teeth. And that'll stop this from running off completely as we're working. So I'm going to go do those little hand sewed zipper stops, and I'll come back and we'll tuck these in and we'll continue on. Okay, I did my little zipper stops and I did up my zipper just to see what it looked like, whether it was running smoothly and all that. And it'll be just fine when we're finished. Now I put some double-sided tape on here, and I'm just going to stick down the zipper ends and our vinyl outer layer just so it gets out of the way. So all we want is for it to stay flat and stay out of the way so we can hem these 2 pieces up. Now, you might want to check, since I turned mine inside out and did the zipper up, if your stabilizer is still sitting in the same spot, you want it shoved up to the top as much as it can go. And I really don't like sticking my vinyl to the stabilizer. I prefer to stick it on the back and have the stabilizer on top. Then when we fold this here, and we fold this here, that is how it's going to be sewed shut. Okay, so now it's time to get our bobbin with the dark purple color I like, because when we sew it shut, we're going to have that thread showing through to the other side, and we want it to be the right color. So let's tuck this in here now. Do I have a front and back? No, I don't have a front and back. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tuck this one in. So I'm going to get some double-sided tape to hold it so that I can sew it down. And make sure it's nice and even along this, so that your line doesn't go like that. Your line will go nice and smooth this way on the bottom. What is that? So that's one side that we'll sew in. And then when it comes to the other side, let's tuck it in. I'm going to use some double-sided tape and some pins and stick it in too, so that we have this sewed in standing up. Back to options, I want to show you. I put double-sided tape on the flap of this and I stuck it down, and I can sew it down with the machine along where the pins are on both sides, or I can just sew the center. Maybe you can't reach in the corners with your machine, and then these corners you can hand sew so that they stay down, and that'll give you a minimum amount of sewing on the outside too. Or I can hand sew the whole thing down very sturdy and nothing will show on this side. So it's up to you what you'd like to do. Don't worry if this pulls up. It's supposed to, because it's never ever going to open flat anyway. So it's okay if you take a little bit more than the seam allowance mentioned in the pattern along here and have these curl up just a little bit. So I'm going to hand sew because my machine is a little bit crabby, but I'm going to hand sew this down all the way through here and around and down again so that this is firmly attached. So my hand sewing is done. Right down there. Attach this to this and this to this, and I did poke through all these layers in some spots because I wanted to make sure this was held in here really well. If you do if you do sew with the machine, you're sewing that flap down through all the layers, this inner layer and the exterior layer, and that's why you'd want to use a thread that looks pretty good with this. It would just go down the crack here of this. Now, let's close this up just a little bit so we can see where the pockets land. And I'm going to put a pin in this side. Not through the vinyl, just through the fabric. Let's make it feel nice. Put a pin in this side. So our divider is being held down like this. The only reason we're doing this is we want to know where we're supposed to sew these four sides. This one, which now I can pin this now that I know where it's landing. And this one. And this. And before we sew it, let's check and see how it looks by taking out these two. Look, I missed one again. Okay, I've got them in. So is this nice and even with here? This one's a bit higher on this side, so I'm going to move this one up just a bit. Does it look good? Yeah. And this one, see now this one's a bit low. So I'm going to move this one up just a bit. There. So that'll be 1, 2, 3 little pockets for you. Now we can sew this down partially or all the way if you can reach with your sewing machine, just along the same line to attach this to the wall of your coffee purse. Or you can sew it by hand again and then nothing will show through on your vinyl. So you can sew it down, all four of them along there. Right? Or you can sew with the machine, either by hand or by machine, whichever works for you. And then we'll be done. And here we have it. Our little pockets inside, and we're finished. Now I did hand sew these down, these four sides here, these corners, and I didn't want to stick sewing through my vinyl. You'd end up with 2 lines here, one there, one there, one there, one there. I have done it before. This one's all fabric, and I did this whole thing on my sewing machine because I was able to, right? And it turned out perfectly fine. I really like it, but it is a lot lighter than this one. This one's heavier with the vinyl, and I didn't want to chance it on my machine. So we have 2 finished coffee purses.
So how'd that go? How did yours turn out? We'd love to see. So please share on all the links to the social media that I put down below in the comments. I'd love to see and comment on your cut and sew or your fabric one, whichever one you make. So thank you for watching, and thank you to the Marathon Society for letting me join them this year. And this will be the last one for the year, so make sure you check everybody's videos out. And hopefully I'll see you again next year. Happy sewing!